Welcome everybody, and thanks for taking the time and joining this webinar with me and Roy Atkinson. So this is a interesting webinar because now I don't actually have to be presenting. I can actually be learning something new. So my name is of course Pasi Nikkanen, one of the co-founders at Happy Signals, and joined with me today is Roy Atkinson from Clifton Butterfield. But I'll let Roy do a little introduction shortly, but maybe a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So as we go along, please just write your questions on the questions tab. You can see it most likely on the right side of your browser. So I'll either pick them up as we go, or then when we come to the end, we can do a Q&A session with Roy and go through the questions. And I know the first question is going to be, when can I get the slides? So the slides are already attached on the attachment tab, so you can download the PDF there. And I guess we'll be around 50 minutes. So, but yeah, now I'll just take my popcorn and enjoy the show. So welcome, Roy, and so happy to have you here.
Well, enjoy your popcorn and make sure you share with all your friends.
Will do.
It's very nice to be here. Thanks for having me do this webinar, and let's talk about employee happiness and what the consequences of that are. So I'm, as Pasi said, Roy Atkinson. I'm from Clifton Butterfield, LLC. I'm in South Carolina in the USA today. Nice to be connected internationally and have this going all around the world. There's some contact information for me. Please feel free to reach out if you have questions or you want to talk further about anything I say today, please do. And again, very happy to be here. And I will tell you that Clifton Butterfield and Happy Signals do work closely together. So it's just so you know that I'm not completely divorced from Happy Signals, but we have a happy relationship with Happy Signals.
That we do. Yeah.
So I'm going to start with the takeaways. You know, a lot of times in presentations, the takeaways are all the way at the end. Well, we'll come back to them later on, but I want to set up the expectations here because experience is all about setting the right expectations and then meeting them or exceeding them. So here's what I expect you to be able to walk away with today. A clear definition of what employee experience means and why it's important. How an iterative feedback-driven approach is the best way to do it and get ahead and make improvements. And we'll go through a bunch of reasons why that's so. And we'll talk about measuring the success of your efforts because that's really important. So those are three very important components of this. Definition of what we're talking about, how the feedback-driven approach works, and how to measure your success. So what is employee experience? There are quite a few definitions for this, of course, but this is one that encompasses a lot, and I happen to like this one a lot. This is very inclusive, and it starts off by saying employee experience is a worker's perceptions, and that's a really important point. Employee experience is not a readout. It's not a number on a chart. It's not something that bounces up and down on your daily dashboard. It is the perceptions of the employees about everything that they live with every day. All the touch points of the company, starting at the beginning before they even start working there, and what's the workspace like, what's the culture like, and the technology. And I highlighted technology because a lot of what we're going to talk about today has to do with the technology touch points. They're all important components of the employee experience, which is often abbreviated as EX. And that should give you a good idea of where we're starting from here. So employee experience, and we're going to emphasize the technology standpoint because that's what Happy Signals is all about. But it's everything, and it's their perceptions of everything.
I love that. I love that, Roy. I haven't seen this, but I love that the perception side. That's good.
Yeah, it's a really important point, and a lot of times people forget that. And it only also in customer experience a lot of times because the technical equipment that's out there, the software that's out there to measure and plan for customer experience and employee experience is getting more and more sophisticated all the time. And we don't want to make the same mistake that IT has made historically, which is relying solely on the technology and not on the people side of things. The people feedback is really important, and that's really the point of today, right? To show how the people feedback, the perceptions can drive improvement. So it's a good place to start. So what about the customer experience, and how does this join up with the customer experience? Because businesses are focused on that now, and how does employee experience affect that? My friend Annette France has recently, actually in the last month, just released a book called Built to Win. And she has something very insightful to say here. Without employees, you have no customer experience. You really don't. Going back through development, even if it's just a piece of software the customers interact with and they never interact with a live person, you still are producing that software, and it's aimed at the customer. You have employees that are doing things for the customer. I'm going to add a thought here too, from Jan Carlson, who was the CEO of SAS, Scandinavian Airline System. And Scandinavian Airline System was, as you may know, like the worst. They were rated very low in customer service. They were not making money. They were losing money. Jan Carlson came in, and within a very short period of time, I believe it was about 2 years, turned it around so that they were rated the highest in customer service, and they were making money. And what Jan Carlson said was, if you're not serving the customer, your job is to be serving someone who is. So employees should be facing in the same direction, supporting the interface between the organization and the customer. And remember that the employees are really essential to the experience of the customer. So a lot of really good thinkers in customer experience and customer service say, take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers. There's a really tight connection between those two things. So, and remember that Peter Drucker, who's a great management thinker, of course, said that the purpose of a business is to create a customer and retain a customer. So that's super important that you face in the same direction. So how do you build a business case for working with experience? And I really like what Barclay Ray said. Barclay's from the UK. If you don't know him, look him up. He's great, great thinker and a great person to follow. He said, when building your case for experience management, you need to clarify the why and how value will be defined and managed. So we're going to talk a lot about the why today. And APM calls it the strategic case for change. That's the why. And this is a lot of where programs and projects go astray because the why is not really clear. There's too much emphasis in a lot of cases on the return on investment, the ROI, and not an ROI, excuse me, and not enough on the WHY. So pay attention to the reason that you're doing things. And if you study project management at all, if you've been a project manager, as I have, you have to include the what's in it for me, the WIPM. What's in it for me? And if you think about it, that's part of the why as well. If the why is clear and if the why is real and important, people get it. They understand what's in it for them. So strategic case for change, that's part of the why. That really defines the why. Then you have to do some economic analysis. You have to get that return on investment. Otherwise, why is your business doing it, right? What is the purpose of the business? To serve the customer. Well, what does that do for you? That brings money, basically. So what's the return on investment? Sourcing and procurement, we don't have to talk about too much today because we're talking about employee perceptions and so forth, but we'll talk about that a little bit. Affordability and the return, we're going to talk about that quite a bit, and maybe it will come from unexpected places. And what's the management approach, or roles and governance that you have here? Those are all things that you should think about when you're building the business case. A lot of these are going to vary depending on what your organization is like. What's the culture like? What are the methods that your organization uses to calculate return on investment? Those vary from firm to firm. But basically, these are the components that you want to have built in. We're going to emphasize some of them much more than others today, but just be aware that these are the major areas that you should be considering. So let's get into the why. Digital transformation is about shifting the organization to new ways of working and new kinds of work using digital technologies as the enablers. Remember, it's not really all about the technology. It's about the shift in work. How does the organization change in response to and to enable the use of these digital technologies? That's super important. And big consequences of change are disruption within the organization. A lot of times people are disrupted. Their work is disrupted. So there was a meeting that I happened to be at. An employee in a large insurance company put it the best ever in terms of change and the consequences of change to the employee. She said, in the wake of a big software change, yesterday I knew how to do my job. Today I don't. That's the level at which people can be affected by this. So transformation is changing an awful lot of things. And employee feedback can really help you, and we'll dive into that. Risk mitigation. Well, how does risk figure into this? Well, when you make a change, there's always a risk. If you know things are working well, the tendency is to continue doing them the same way. But you know you have to change. Well, every change brings on a risk. So it's how much risk do you have an appetite for? How much risk does that particular change present? And that's why organizational change management is important. And that's why things like change enablement within the technology is important to mitigate some of that risk. Then we have to talk about cost stabilization and control. Well, are there ways you can look at stabilizing the costs of things? How will you make those changes? If you don't know what the outcome is going to be, then how can you project what the costs are going to be? How can you project what the risk is going to be? So you have to try to predict the outcome of the change as well as possible. And then think about workforce retention. Is that a topic right now? Oh, you bet. Especially here in the United States, but in other countries as well. We have what's called the Great Resignation or the Big Quit. It's amazing how many people are leaving jobs and moving jobs right now. And there's a lot of opportunity to move right now because of the incoming hybrid work, remote work. Things certainly shifted during the beginning of the pandemic, and it became possible, and it became very clear to organizations that had been fighting about work from home and remote work that this is the way things are going to happen now. We can do this, and we can do it well, and things will continue. So now people out working remotely, what that means is that organizations don't have to look just in their local areas to find workers. They can look anywhere. So now you have large companies with deep pockets reaching out to top talent in smaller companies or companies that don't pay as much and saying, hey, we're going to give you a $20,000 bonus to come work for us. And that's happening. And I've talked to people whose teams are vanishing because their competition is cherry picking their people. So it's very important to think about workforce retention. Competition for talent, brain drain. We haven't touched on that just yet. What does that mean? Well, knowledge is walking out the door. People who are experienced and good at what their jobs are leaving. And what does that do for your organization? Well, it means that unless you've got a very good knowledge management system, and that could be another webinar, by the way, that you're losing that organizational knowledge. And it's extremely important to think about that. And in the world of social media, reputation is important, right? Reputation of your company. If your top talent is walking out the door and people are looking at websites like Glassdoor and so forth, they're seeing that people are leaving. They're saying, well, maybe this company isn't so good to work for. People are writing the reviews of their jobs. That's really important to consider too. So what is the reputation of your company going to be like? But as we said, the money is really important. And since we're talking about employees leaving, you have to consider the cost of employee churn. And that is, let's say, very expensive and usually is not thoroughly considered. I remember doing some research a few years ago about what was being called the war for talent, and that's much more relevant even now than it even was then. And talking about the cost of turnover, and there are multiple costs of turnover. And in black and white, you could say right now, according to Employee Benefit News, it will cost about $20,000 extra to replace an employee who makes $60,000. So it costs a third of their salary just to get a replacement. You have to advertise, you have to interview, you might have to pay for travel for candidates to come to you if you want to interview them in person. It's all of those costs that are built in, plus the fact, and this is often not considered, is you have to think about where the work goes. When you're missing somebody on your team, where does that work go? Usually it either doesn't get done at all, or it goes to other members of the team. And if it goes to other members of the team, well, that means that they're absorbing more work. It means that they're potentially not as happy as they were last week because they're absorbing more work because Harry left the building. And now, so Sherry has to do much more work, etc. The second bullet here is the unmeasured cost of interruption. And this is something that I've been talking about a lot. And I think that it's really important to think about this. And that's where a lot of this presentation is going to lean on the financial side of things. And it's really amazing how expensive it is when things are not going well. Let's put it that way. In addition to the fact that project false starts and project failures are very expensive, there are a lot of really good sources on that material, including people like Michael Krigsman. You can look at how the high percentage of projects that either fail, they don't meet their goals, or there are long delays in the project. There are false starts where a company will say, we're going to do this year, and they start down that road, and then suddenly something else comes up and they drop it, and it costs millions and millions of dollars. How can you improve that percentage of success? Well, we'll talk a little bit about that, and specifically in terms of employee feedback. How does that work? Wow. Now, I want to dispel one myth before we go any further. There's the old saying about if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And that's usually used in terms of Henry Ford and the automobile. Well, guess what? Henry Ford never said that. He never said it.
I know. Yeah.
It's amazing how many, I like the internet meme where it has a picture of Abraham Lincoln and he says how things on the internet are false. It's very funny, but also true, right?
Yeah.
So we'll show how paying attention can be a very good thing. Listen to what people are telling you. They have good messages for you. So I tell, and remember that the road to service management is paved littered with the corpses of people who took a framework as dogma. It shouldn't be dogma. It isn't dogma. It's just a framework, and it can help you. That's the whole point. You don't have to believe in ITIL. You don't have to believe in DevOps. It's a way to help you. But one of the best pieces of guidance that ITIL offers, I think, is progress iteratively with feedback. Do a little at a time, see how it's going, do a little more, see how it's going, do a little more, see how it's going. And the same is true with you can hear DevOps in that, of course. Agile, same idea. Do smaller steps and check to see how it's going. And that is really the key to having improvement happen by using this employee feedback. It's right there. You move ahead and listen to what people are telling you about what you just did, right? So whether you use ITIL or not, recognize the wisdom of that statement. Some of the reasons for these project and program failures that we've seen over the years is unclear and shifting goals. Oh, that never happens, right? Your company always knows exactly what's going to happen. It's never the priority of one person, and then that person leaves the company and everything's shit. That never happens. Of course, I'm kidding. I'm being facetious here. It happens all the time. Unclear and shifting goals. And I can't quote Billy Connolly, the Scottish comedian, in full because he uses words that are not suitable for work. But I will tell you that he says something very close to, tomorrow this will all be changed, so stay awake. And that is a very typical thing that you hear in business. Communication problems. When people talk about the issues inside businesses, communication problems pops at the top all the time. And part of that is that an awful lot of people within organizations, especially large ones, think that communication means saying it, saying it, saying it, saying it, and saying it, when it doesn't mean that. It means saying it and listening, saying it and listening. It's a two-way dialogue. If I didn't listen to Posse this morning, it would be a different conversation, right? It would be very one-sided. He's listening to me right now, but he'll have things to say about it. Lack of planning. What is it? Fail to plan, you plan to fail. And lack of risk management. Oh, we'll just do it and see what happens later. Well, that's not really a great approach to take. So there's the button. Scope creep. That never happens either, right? People won't come back at you and they don't say, oh, we decided we want this too. While you're doing it, can you do this as well? So don't expect people to just absorb the creep. Make sure that you define the scope carefully. Lack of communication is just as bad as too much communication. And people say you can't communicate too much. Guess what? Yes, you can. Because what happens is people tune out. They don't hear you anymore. Right? All clear? Let's move on. For project success, and we're not talking about specifically with a project here, but projects are bound up with this. Make sure that your goals are specific, measurable, and that you get feedback on what you're doing. Again, that iterative improvement with feedback. Yeah, and we're going to show how select.
Yeah, maybe add on that, that the goal is not the kind of the getting to the budget or getting to the kind of deadline of the project. Like it needs to be something like you put here, specific, measurable, something that has some outcome to it, rather than just, okay, we made the deadline, we made the budget type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can make the budget and the deadline and have no impact on business whatsoever. Think about that. You've probably seen that happen too. Communication plan, have a plan for communication, stick to the plan, and give the responsibility for that to somebody who really has either some training or background in communication. It's not good enough to be able to write an email. There's more to it than that. And if you want success, work with people who A, know what they're doing, and B, listen. It's important. All right. Plan around items indicated by employee experience data. Now, we're going to talk about that very specifically and why this is a good idea. This is really the crux of what we're talking about today. How do you build that plan around that employee experience data? And risk management, again, mitigation through data-driven iterative approach. So if you've got data that this is working, you try something and you have data that it works, then you can go ahead to the next step. And you're reducing your risks by taking smaller steps and get driven by that data, driven by the feedback that you're getting at every step. Really important to think about things that way. All right. All right. Financials. Again, cost of employee churn, about a third of a worker's annual salary. And it's amazing how much it costs even to replace somebody who's making minimum wage, right? At the entry-level people, it costs a lot of money to replace them.
Yeah, that's a good when I was working with a large IT company, like in the IT department, running the internal services, and there was my colleague was saying that a manager told him that just think that if you can save that one person doesn't leave, then you made your kind of the goal. You made kind of the return on investment is there. It's crazy to think like how big that cost really is.
It's huge, and it's not something that's usually measured.
Yeah, exactly.
And remember that a lot of these things aren't measured, and we're about to dive into the big one, which is the unmeasured cost of interruptions. But this stuff doesn't get measured for one reason, and that's because we silo the organizations, right? IT is responsible for IT, and HR is responsible for certain things, and benefits are reporting for certain things, facilities over here, and they don't talk to each other. They don't work off common data. They don't see the impact of what's going on. So let's look at some of that, and you can see how this happens. So just in terms of the length of the interruptions, so about 3 hours and 6 minutes per incident, and that's right from the Happy Signals Global IT Experience Benchmark Report. If you don't look at that report, you should. Absolutely. It's updated all the time. Every half year, a new one comes out, looking back at what's happened, looking at the changes in between. There's some analysis that's done. It's a great report, very useful. So about 3 hours per interruption, and another component of that is that every time that case gets reassigned, it's another hour. So look at that from the employee's standpoint, and we're going to look at that. Projects, false starts, and failures we've looked at briefly. That's a topic unto itself, and I'm just mentioning it here because it does have a financial impact on your organization, especially for IT, and it can be huge. Well, let's look at the unmeasured cost of interruption. Now, traditionally, IT measured the cost of an incident using the fully burdened cost per ticket. That's the typical way that IT measured the impact of interruptions. Now it includes support staff salary, it includes the office space, it includes the equipment and the software licensing, and all the things the service desk uses when they are responding to and fixing incidents. Well, that's great. That's all the IT silo information, but none of the impact. What's the impact of these interruptions? So let's look at the impact data using several sources, including MetricNet, HCI, and Happy Signals. So MetricNet says from 0.5 to 1.5 tickets per user per month is average. So let's say 1. That's right in the middle. Let's say 1 ticket per user per month. HCI studies say roughly, pretty much every year, a little over half of tickets that come into the service desk are incidents. It's, for those of you who are not IT people, incidents means unplanned outages, as opposed to requests, which are questions or I need this particular service. Can you do that for me? So let's talk just about incidents. So 54% of incidents, 54% of tickets are incidents. That's from HCI. So let's say we have 5,000 users in our organization, and you can Throw your own numbers into this and you'll see what happens. 5,000 users, 1 ticket a month. That's 5,000 tickets a month. 54% of those are incidents, unplanned outages. Gives us 2,700 incidents per month. Okay. So in the US, the average salary per year is $51,480, and that breaks down to $24.75 an hour, and that comes from policyadvice.net. Okay, so 2,700 incidents times 3 hours. We're just rounding down. It's 3 hours and 6 minutes according to the Happy Signals data. We'll just round it down to 3 hours. So that gives us 8,100 hours of lost time per month. Is this starting to look like a big number now? Yes, it is. Okay. So lost time, 8,100 hours a month times $24.75 an hour is $200,475 a month, or $2,405,700 a year lost time. Now, let me make this clear. I want you to hear this bit. That we're not talking about the cost of downtime. That's something else. Downtime is measured at the machine level. When did the server go off? When did it come back on? That was your downtime. We're talking about the impact on the employee. And this includes things like, this is totally from their standpoint. Remember, they're reporting that it's 5 hours, that it's 3 hours per incident. What does that mean? Well, first, there's that time when they went to Google to see if they could fix it. And then they talked to their neighbor to see if they could fix it. And then they contacted IT. And then they didn't hear back from IT for a half an hour. And then they talked to 2 people and nobody had the right answer for them and couldn't get it fixed. It's all of that bundled up. Plus, now once they've got it fixed, there's recovery time. Remember that your attention doesn't immediately snap back to where it was. It takes you a certain amount of time to get back to what you were doing. It's about 20 minutes. When you get interrupted, it's about a third of an hour just to get back to where your mindset, refocus on what you're doing when you get interrupted. So let's think of the financial impact of all of that. $2,405,700 a year if you have an average number of incidents in an organization of 5,000 people, which is not huge. Let's face it. It's a big company, but it's not a huge company. So there's all of that good money going out the window if you're not paying attention. If you're only focused on the cost per ticket, that's not showing the picture. This is much more what the real picture looks like. And if you can get a 10% reduction, just 10%, that's $240,000. Let's round it up a little bit to $250,000.
Yeah.
Right. That's on a 10% reduction.
Because this is something that we have been kind of doing just from a little bit different angle, just getting also to the same point that it is the actual, and then it doesn't really count like the frustration that comes out of it. It is still the perception that, okay, in this case, I lost this much time, but how much does it for the rest of the day? Or, if it's like a end of the month and I need to get something done, and like how frustrating is that? But yeah, this is amazing, and nice to see the numbers. They are like that US average salary. And I guess then depending a little bit on the industry, let's say that you're banking or industry, insurance industry, I guess that's a little bit higher, but it's good to have this kind of average thing just to point out that this is the thing that you don't know that is happening every day.
Right. And that's why I call it the unmeasured cost, because we tend not to measure this. Yeah. But that's on a 10% reduction. And as you know, Posse, one of your big customers that I've talked to as well, Alstrom Munksjö, they reported a 57% reduction in lost time. Yeah. Because they started paying attention to that end user data and working on the right things. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, the average is getting 26 with our customers when they start to pay attention. But we also kind of always do that, hey, like aim for something that you believe in, like 10%, because then you feel, okay, that's achievable, we can do it, but it will
Yep.
most likely, create into bigger impacts.
Yeah. So there's your ROI. There's your cost justification. This is what you can take to your financial people and sell it on. Look, if we pay attention here and work on the things that are really impacting the productivity of the employees of this organization, we can save money, and here's how it works.
Yeah.
So that there's the key.
Hey, there's one question related to this, so maybe shall we go through it right away? So it goes like, sometimes it's not just about the tech stops working. Sometimes it's about not being able to find a template for a customer. Same thing, searching files, Googling it, asking a colleague, ask an admin. Employee experience is also about having all the tools to get the work done. Have you done measurement on this as well? Well, basically, at least what we do with our customers is about everything. It's not just tech. It could be that, they didn't even help me, or things like that. Do you have any comment on that question?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And if you think back to that definition of employee experience we talked about at the beginning, it is about every touch point.
Exactly.
And if you are paying attention to employee feedback, and what you keep hearing is, I can't find things in the knowledge base. I can't find the template that I need. I can't get access to the application that I want. I can't do this. Then that's where you focus your attention.
Yeah.
People will tell you what's bothering them and what's holding them back. And you create an atmosphere in which that can happen without people sounding whiny or without being complainers, just, hey, yesterday I was trying to find this thing and I couldn't find the thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of that goes back to, there's a very interesting thing about metrics, right? We know you get what you measure. And I was thinking yesterday, for some reason, in a job that I had a few years ago, one of the things that I was responsible for was a lot of the tech environment. And one of the things that popped up on my radar was the fact that people were having this specific problem with printers. And we had hundreds and hundreds of printers in this organization. And I was trying to find information about this particular issue that people kept seeing. It was one thing they kept seeing. And I was trying to find information on, I was on the printer maker's website. And if you think about who makes most of the printers in the world, you know who I'm talking about. And I spent 2 hours on that website trying to find this information and getting very frustrated. And of course, you couldn't find anybody to talk to at the company, even though we had a select agreement with them and so forth and so on. And so I started thinking about that, and I thought, it suddenly popped into my head, you know what? The web team at that company is getting rated on how much time customers spend on the page. Time on page is a positive metric for your website, right? Well, not in this case, because I'm spending 2 hours and I can't get anything done. So be careful what you're measuring too. It can have an adverse effect.
And there's one hidden thing that even in this one, that especially when we are talking about people being at the office, we know that there are different type of behavioral profiles of people, how they behave in support situation. Certain people actually, they ask a colleague, so they actually take other people's time as well. So it actually might be that for an hour, there's 2 people solving the problem before they contact IT. And that's also like, that person saying that I lost three hours doesn't mean that, and also my colleague lost 1 hour. But yeah. But I'll let you continue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sure. So let's forge ahead here. So as we said, specific, actionable, measurable in order to drive continual improvement, right? To be useful, the feedback has to be specific, actionable, and measurable. Well, how can you make sure that that's the case? The idea is that you measure frequently and continually, and you measure as close to real time as you possibly can. That is key with customer experience. It's key with employee experience. Get that feedback right now. while it's fresh in the person's mind, while they're feeling the way that they're feeling. If they're angry, they're going to let you know. If they're happy, they're going to let you know, and make it as specific as possible. This is how your guidance happens. It's super important to get that happening rapidly and over again. So let's look at some of the things from the happiness reports. And here you can see, and this is in organizations using the Happy Signals experience management platform. It should be stated that that's the case. But here you can see how lost time and happiness crisscross, and how lost time going down, happiness going up. Now, don't confuse correlation with causation. Okay, this doesn't mean that reducing the lost time will necessarily increase happiness a certain number of points. It's what happens. It's what happened in these organizations. It's what is likely to happen. But don't let correlation and causation get confused in your mind. There's an old legal saying, it's called post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means after it, therefore because of it. And that's a logical fallacy. But this is what's going on in companies right now. So we're going to come back to some of that data as well. It's likely that a reduction in lost time will increase happiness. Well, why would that happen? Well, because the frustration goes away. That Posse was talking about how frustrated people feel. It's that lost productivity. It's that boss screaming in your ear that you have a deadline to meet. It's extremely likely that listening to feedback and acting on it will increase happiness. This is really important. Remember, we're talking about perceptions here. And if your perception is that I'm not listening to you, you're not going to be as happy as if I am listening to you and I'm acting on what you tell me. One of the big frustrations for IT end users has been that, yes, you fill out the stupid satisfaction survey after every single ticket, every single time, and nothing ever changes. So listening and acting on it. And when people start to discover that you're listening to what they're telling you, life starts to change at that point, okay? And also, it's extremely likely that feedback from end users will guide you in deciding where and when to make improvements. If they say, oh, it's these stupid printers, this happens every time I go to print something, well, where should you be looking? At your network? Probably not. Let's look at the software interface with the printers. Is that the problem? When's it happening? Where is it happening? Listen to what people are telling you. It's amazing what can happen. So here's one. These are all the different areas that the Happy Signals systems measures, right? And interfaces with IT. How do the employees interact with IT service portal, mobile devices, laptops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's look at one area here. And you can see at the top, service portal went from -18 up to 0. Well, something happened there. Part of that might have been the fact that employees were more dependent on the portal and getting used to using the portal. But probably some of it was also due to the fact that the portals were improving. Okay, so you can see that specifically the service portal needed attention and is probably getting attention. That's where your organization needs to focus. That -18 was the lowest rated way of interacting with IT for a long period of time, Posse, right?
Yeah.
And so let's put some attention on the portal is a really good thing to do. Not scattershot, not let's take a guess and see if this works. You know, because people are telling you the service portal sucks and I'm not using it, right?
Yeah.
So feedback guides improvement. The happiness score tells where specifically to put your effort. You look at all those different areas that you can measure, and then it will tell you where you put your effort to get the improvement. And then the next cycle will tell you, as soon as you get that feedback, you know whether it's working or not. Does this score go up? Did it not go up? Why didn't it go up? Well, now you can ask for more feedback. Okay, you get that feedback right away, and it will help you improve. So feedback guides improvement.
Yeah, and
Yay.
here I might maybe
It's,
also add that that's why it's very important that it's continuous, because at the old time when
yes.
I was there in the IT company doing it, we did like a yearly survey. So it's like looking at the weather once a year and deciding what to wear. It
Mhm.
like, makes no sense. And then you wait for a year to see that, should I now change to summer clothes? Oh, not again. So yeah,
I love that. Can I use that?
yes, you can. Yes. I think it actually came from some of our customers, so I'm not even going to take credit out of it. But I just thought it was an
It's
awesome metaphor. That yeah,
it is. It's brilliant. I love it. So let's look at feedback guiding improvement. All right. Again, we've got impact of reassignment. As the number of reassignments goes up, look at the lost time and look at the happiness. Lost time goes up every time a ticket gets reassigned, and people are not happy about it. Why? Because they're losing time. It's affecting their job performance, and people don't like to have their job performance affected by things they can't control. So think about how you can help them get their job done. That is the job of support specifically, and certainly it's anything to do with technology. It's the idea is that it helps you do your job. So you, in this example, an hour of lost time added, 8 points down in the happiness rating. So there's pretty clear correlation there, and one could say one is driving the other. So there's your annual survey. 85% of end users say they're satisfied or very satisfied with IT services. What does that tell you? It doesn't tell you anything. IT end users say they are least happy with our portal is a big difference. There's a huge difference between those two things. Or each additional ticket reassignment is a drop in 8 points of happiness and an hour of lost time. That's very specific feedback and a very specific area, and it's telling you where you should focus your attention. So you've got specific information about where to improve and repeating feedback on each improvement. What more could you want? It's a wonderful system, and it makes perfect sense. All right, so here's the blueprint, and it's called the Itxm Framework. And guess where it comes from? It comes from Happy Signals. And guess who's certified so far in the Itxm Framework? It's me. Baseline, set a baseline, measure your employee happiness, make the data visible to everybody, make sure everybody knows what's going on, identify specific opportunities for improvement, and specific is the operative word there, and measure again, and then do it again and again and again. As Posse just said, it has to be continual, right? Don't go by the weather forecast once a year.
Yeah, and I think there's maybe one to add there is the celebrating the success, because I was talking with one company the other week, and we were talking about this perception thing. Like, what if you make an impact to a process? Like you save 1 minute from some process. Does it make you feel all joyful and happy, and you're smiling for the rest of the day? What if you made an impact to the people's perception of the service that you created? That's like you actually made people say that, yes, now I don't lose so much time. Now I'm happier. Doesn't that make you like a purpose for why to work in IT? So that's also, I think the celebration thing is sometimes missing, because you're not measuring, then you can't really celebrate the real goal that IT has. So
yeah, absolutely. Oh, you mean IT has a goal? Oh my goodness. I mean, it's helping people be productive and get their jobs done. Oh my goodness. So let's
companies that need IT, right?
Yes, right. Who needs IT? Yeah. Nobody needs it, especially now during digital transformation and hybrid work and all that stuff. Who needs it? So let's review a little bit. We talked about there's going to be the why and the how. So the why: digital transformation, remote hybrid work, all of this stuff that's bound up with technology, the Great Resignation that's bound up with job satisfaction, competition for talent that's bound up with keeping your folks on the happy side of things. Brain drain, you don't want to lose all that knowledge. You don't want to damage your company's reputation. And the reputation, let's get specific here, You don't want to damage the reputation of IT either. You want to improve the reputation of IT. And how do you do that? By listening to what people are telling you. It's amazing what happens when you have these dialogues. And you can mitigate the risk of making changes by making sure you're making the right changes and then getting that feedback as close to real time as you possibly can. So important. So that's the why side of things. So how do you do this? Well, you measure experience status, you baseline it, you share it, then you look at the opportunities that you have to make improvements. You make the improvements, and then you get feedback on the improvements, like how are we doing? Is this the right place to go? What are we seeing in terms of how employees feel about that particular change? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it indifferent? Did it have the impact we thought it was going to have? And then you do it again and again and again and again, so that you're making continual improvements, and you have those improvements that are driven by data that you're getting from employee experience. It really makes a lot of sense. This is a very logical system. And if you're not improving, you're falling behind. So we all know that, especially when things are moving as rapidly as they are currently. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So here's your takeaways we talked about at the beginning. And I said I'd come back to them, and here they are. Did we get a clear definition of what EX means? Yes, we did. It's employee perceptions of everything that they deal with in terms of their jobs. Did we talk about how an iterative feedback-driven approach to continual improvement can help with opportunities, decreases risks, and increases chances of success? Yes, we spent a lot of time working with that. And how to measure the success of your efforts? Yes, you get continual feedback. You get it as close to real time as possible. You make an improvement, you get the feedback, and you move on to the next one. So there's the 3 things I said you were going to get out of this webinar. So hopefully you've got those and maybe a little bit more.
Awesome. Thank you, Roy.
Happy signals. More smiles, less time wasted.